Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I got here the Can-Am Defender and I'm going to be installing the High Lifter lift kit. So let's get to it. Here's everything that comes in the High Lifter kit. We have our front and rear coil spring spacers, the rear brackets and spacers, bolts, nuts, washers, the instructions, and a few stickers. Today I'm going to be using these coil spring compressors that I picked up at my local automotive store. The first thing I'm going to do is jack it up and get the front tires off the ground. Now I'm going to take my 15mm socket and wrench and take off the front shock. Now that I got the spring out, I'm going to set it in my vise and attach my spring compressors and start squishing it down until I can remove this top plate. It'll slide out through that channel right there. Now that I got the spring off, I'm also going to remove this bottom collar here. And then we can slide down our coil spring spacer. For the front, we're going to use the 58Z. Slide the collar back on. And now we can put the spring back on. As you can see, my spring compressors are almost maxed out. So I did have to grab a pry bar and a screwdriver and just pry down on the spring a little bit so I could slide the plate in and then give it a little tap with the hammer. Now I can release the spring compressors. Now I can reinstall the front shock with the stock bolts. This install is the same for both sides of the machine, so I won't bother showing you the other side. If you're finding this one useful, make sure you hit that subscribe button, click that bell, and smash that thumbs up. It really goes a long way to helping out the channel. Now I'm going to jack up the rear and remove the rear shock just like I did in the front. Now that I got the rear spring out, I'm going to stick it in the vise, compress the spring, and remove the cap, just like I did on the front one. The rear spring spacer has the part number 80P. I'm going to slide that on. And then the spring collar. And now I can reinstall the spring. Before I reinstall the rear shock, I need to install the bracket here. It is going to sit pointed outwards like that. I'm going to have the small spacer going through the original shock mount, the large spacer on the outside here, and 2 washers on either side with the shock in the middle. I found the front plate wasn't quite fitting into place properly. It was getting caught up on the weld, so I had to take it to my bench grinder and cut it down just a little bit. Here you can see the difference between the two. Now I can install the bracket. Starting with the unmodified plate, I'm going to stick the bolt in the hole, and I'm going to stick the small 4Y spacer in the original shock mount. And then I'll stick the modified plate on the front and put a nut on. Now I'm going to use the large 4X spacer for the outside hole. And put a nut on. And now I can mount the rear shock. Here's the bracket mounted up. Make sure you have 2 washers on the back side and 2 washers on the front side. Here's the large 4X spacer and the small 4Y spacer down underneath. To make it a little easier, I did remove the rear wheel. Now I can go ahead and tighten up all the bolts on the bracket, and don't forget about the bolt on the top. Repeat the same procedure on the other side of the machine, and then we're pretty much all done here. Don't forget to place your warning label. I've placed it right by the stock warning label. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button or click up here to check out the next video. This has been my lift kit install on the Can-Am Defender. Ride safe.